Hey, Jacques here. Okay, this video, we are creating a Bootstrap based full menu system in a Figma design. Now, this video is part of a huge video that's about 2 hours or so. It's a whole course of how I show you how to design a website from scratch in Figma using auto layout, but it is based on the Bootstrap framework. So it's based on Bootstrap 5.3. In this specific video, I'm going to show you how to design a logo, but not just that, I'm also going to show you how to properly create a menu structure. Now, the thing is, here's the quick thing. This entire design and this video and the big video, it's all about creating or designing a website to easily fit with Bootstrap. So when we get to developing everything, it's going to be quite easy to slot everything in. Now, another thing, just before we jump into this, very quick, everything is in the description below. The entire design, I've added the design to the community, and all the assets and media, everything is in the description below. And the link to the large video is also in the description below. So before we start jumping into this, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button, because I am going to drop a video on how to develop this design using Bootstrap with minimal code, minimal custom class, CSS classes, Sass classes for that matter. And it's all to create a high performance website. So check this out. Okay, so with that done, the next step or the next thing I want to do is actually start with the navigation itself. So with that said, we're going to zoom in. We're going to start putting together the logo itself. Now, because this is just a demonstration, we are just going to use an icon. And we're just going to put together a logo. So I'm going to click within my actual frame, and I'm going to open up the actual plugins section of Figma itself. Now, remember earlier I said that I don't use the icons of Figma itself. And the reason for that is because I use a plugin called Iconify, which is a great plugin. And I'm going to go ahead and open that right now. Once I open that, I am actually going to search for fitness. Because this is a fitness website, I am just going to search for an icon that might work. Okay, so I personally really like this icon right here. And so when I click on it, it will push us down. And the next step is you can actually select the colors that you want it to be. Now you're going to notice that it also shows all the document colors. Now this is the same colors that we've set earlier on. So I'm going to select our actual primary color. And with that selected, we are going to stick with 25 pixels for now. And I'm going to import the icon itself. Now you're going to notice when you import the icon that it creates a separate frame, which I personally don't like. So I am going to click on it, not right click, and we're going to change it to group on the right-hand side. Now it is a group, but you're going to notice that it dropped it right in the middle of our frame. So why is that? Well, the reason for it is because we're using auto layout. Okay, so before we change that, I'm just going to rename this actual group and I'm going to call it logo. And I want to actually add a text as well. And we're going to call this great fitness. I think that's a great name for what we're trying to achieve here and for what we're trying to design here. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I actually want to change the font of this. Now, when we change the font, we're actually going to select our text and we are going to click on the little text on the right-hand side. We're going to use that foundation of Bootstrap that's already inside of the UI kit. So we're going to play around here and we're going to look for a nice, good looking font that's actually going to work for our logo. Now, H6 looks pretty good. And if I zoom out, it's getting there. It's getting there. But I don't like the thickness of the font itself. So we definitely want to have a look at if there's any other type of options that we can play around with. And so I can see that we have bold, we have extra bold. And so really essentially, let's try and use base text. That is too thin. So when you're in situations like this, where you have a specific font in mind, or you have a specific thickness in mind, you want to detach it and you can manually go and change it. So I want it to be about semi-bold. I think that's a good size. The next thing though, is you'll see that we have 16px and I want to make the line height 16px as well. When it comes to actual alignment, we want to make sure that it is closely to the font itself. Otherwise, your alignments are going to be incorrect. So with that done, we are going to select both the text and the icon, which I just did right here. And we're going to group this together. And I'm going to rename it to primary logo. You're going to see that I don't use any spacing. That again is a personal preference. Now with it renamed, we're actually going to activate auto layout, and I'm going to make sure that it is centered. And we can also change the spacing between the actual icon, but I feel like 10 for now is good. Okay, so now that we have the logo done, the next thing we need to do is actually get it to where we want it to be. With the actual container selected, we're actually going to drag this auto layout item, this primary logo, we're going to drag it inside of container. And when you've dragged it inside of container, and because we've hidden it earlier on in the video, we're actually going to unhide it, and we're going to hide the rectangle now. And I'm just going to rename the rectangle to base guidance. Okay, so now that we've renamed it, you're going to notice because we've added it into the container, it's actually perfectly fit to where we want it to be. So when I zoom out, you can see that we didn't really do much to get it to this point, which is pretty good. I really like that. I really like that. All right, so now the primary logo is done. So the next steps we need to do, we actually need to start adding the menu itself. To add the menu, there are multiple ways of doing this. When you navigate over to Bootstrap UI Kit, one of the pages at the left, you'll notice that there is a navbar component already available for you to use. Now, personally, I don't use this. I don't like this navigation or navbar. I like to be a little bit more in control and custom when it comes to creating the navigation or the navbar itself. So with that said, we're going to navigate back to homepage, and we're going to put together a good looking navbar. So the first thing I want to do is I want to minimize primary logo and select container, take the text toolkit, and we're going to drop it into the actual frame itself and into the actual auto layout itself. Now with that dropped, I'm just going to type in home. We are going to make sure that it is set to the default font of the entire frame. So here you can see that it is using Roboto. The default for this entire UI kit, which you can change if you want to, is enter. All right, so now home is created. I'm actually going to take home and I'm going to duplicate it. And with it duplicated, I'm going to rename it, and we can call it services for that matter. And I'm going to duplicate it again, and we are going to call it our facility. Perfect. I'm going to duplicate it again. I'm going to say about, and I'm going to duplicate it one more time, and we're going to call it contact. So now we have a basic navigation structure. What I want to do is I want a drop-down arrow for services and a drop-down arrow for our facility. So to achieve that, we're going to select services, and I'm going to open up my plugins again. I'm going to open up Iconify, and this is why it's so powerful, and this is why I really like it. We're going to go ahead and search for arrow down. I'm going to see what options are available. Honestly, this is not what I'm looking for. So let's try carrot. That looks better. Okay, let's say carrot down and see what we have. Okay, this is getting closer. I really like this for now. So I'm going to select that, and I am going to change it to the default dark color, which I believe is this one right here. With that selected, it's 25, and we're going to import it right now. I'm going to close this guy down, and you're going to see that it imported it exactly where we don't want it, which is fine. But always remember, when you import an Iconify, we want to change the frame to group. And now we are just going to call it arrow down. Perfect. And I'm just going to move it to services. So now that it's moved to services, I'm actually going to duplicate it again, and we are going to put it next to our facility. The next step is I just want to make it a tiny bit smaller. So I'm going to actually constrain the properties, because if you don't do that and you start changing the width and the height, you are going to get a stretched result, which is definitely not what we want. So I'm going to constrain it. I'm going to change it to 16, and I'm going to do the same for the other arrow as well. We're going to constrain it and change it to 16. Perfect. So now that that is done, we're actually going to select arrow down and services. We're going to group it again, and we are going to rename it to services, and I'm going to activate auto layout. Next thing is I actually want to bring the arrow closer to services itself. So we're actually going to change the gap. Let's change it to 6. All right, let's go ahead and do the same for arrow down and our facility. Group it together. We're going to call it our facility. Oh, I don't like spaces. That is a development trait. Okay, perfect. So that is renamed. We're going to activate auto layout and we're going to change this to 6. Okay, so now what I want to do is I just want to hit the play button real quick and I want to see just super quickly how this all looks like so far. And you can always keep the preview mode open and ready. It's going to show it in a laptop view, which is, you can either like it or you hate it. I'm just going to leave it as is, but we can see that the arrow, in my opinion, needs to be a tiny bit smaller. I feel like it's too big right now. So I'm actually going to go back and we're going to select our arrow and I'm just going to make it 14. See how that looks like. Actually, let's make it 12. All right, so that's starting to look good. The next thing I want to do is click the actual auto layout of our facility. I'm just going to move this guy down. That looks better. That looks better. So basically what I did is I changed the align to be at the bottom center. So I'm going to go back to our preview mode and see, yeah, that is a little too small. And that's the thing about design, right? You always need to play around with items, with components, with icons, you name it, to get the actual result that you're looking for. So I'm going to go back to this arrow drop down and let's change it to 14 and see how that looks like. Yeah, that looks perfect. That's exactly what I want. So let's do the same for the other one as well. So I'm going to click on services, open it up, select arrow down. We're going to change it to 14. And I'm also going to change the actual layout or the alignment to be bottom center. Okay, perfect. So now we have a basic menu structure. So the next step is to actually group this all together and get it to where we want it to be on the page itself. So to do that, I'm going to select all of our text and or group items, and I'm going to group it, and I'm just going to call it inner nav, and we're going to activate auto layout. Perfect. And now the next thing is I want to move the spacing a little bit. So let's try 25, and I'm just going to go back to preview mode. Yes, 25 looks good. I actually want to right align this navigation on the right hand side. So to do that, we're going to click on container here. We are going to change this little 10px gap. We're going to change it to auto, and it's going to move it to the right hand side. Go back to preview. Okay, so our preview is a little out for sure. So to fix this, and because we don't want to look at the laptop itself, we're actually going to navigate back to Figma. We're going to click on prototype. And when we click on prototype, we're actually going to, again, click on our layer itself, make sure that is selected. And I'm going to click on show property settings. You're going to see that it has a device activated. So I'm just going to scroll up and we're just going to deactivate that. We're going to say none. And when we navigate back, we're going to see a full view, which is exactly what we want. So now that we've figured that out, now that we have that done, I actually want to fine tune our menu items. So I'm going to go back and we're going to zoom in. And what I want to do is I actually want to select the text items itself. Now, if you want to individually select the text items like this, you can hold in Shift and Control, or Command and Shift, or Control and Shift. And we're going to change this to medium. Okay, so now that it's changed to medium, I'm going to keep home on semi-bold because that indicates to the user that they are on that actual page. The next step I want to do is actually change the color of this entire thing. So we're going to select the inner nav, and we are going to, where it says selected colors, where it says 0000000, we're going to change this, and I want it to be a little lighter. That's too light for my preference. So we're going to scroll down. We're going to look for a pre-made Bootstrap variable. So gray 800 might work. Let's go back to preview. That looks good for now. I really like that. But we got to do the same for the arrows itself. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because we can see here where it says selection colors, you're going to notice there's another color, and that color comes from our actual arrows, down arrows itself. So I'm actually going to change this to 800 as well. Perfect. Okay, so now when we go back, we can see, okay, cool. We have our navigation on the right-hand side, and we have our logo on the left-hand side. So this is a good start. The next thing I want to do is actually add a button so that people can actually go to our store. So I'm going to go back and we are now going to start using the assets to achieve this. So I'm going to select the inner navigation or the inner nav auto layout. I'm going to go to assets and we're going to select the Bootstrap UI kit. And we're just going to see, okay, so the buttons are not there. We're going to look at foundation. It's not there. Components, buttons, perfect. It's right there. So what I'm going to do is select the button. And when you select the button, you're going to see it just says button, but you're going to also notice that it is the right color. So I'm going to drag this right here. When you drag it, by the way, you'll notice that it automatically puts it, does the alignment for you. Everything is done, which is great. Just want to make sure, yeah, it is an inner nav, which is perfect. And now I just want to go ahead and change the actual text of button, and we can just say shop now. Let's change it to shop now. Okay, so let's have a look. Now, a couple of things. This button is too big, so I'm going to make it a little smaller. To do that, on the right-hand side, you're going to see a couple of variables that we can change. And so I want to change this L to M, and let's have a look at that. Let's see how that looks like. That looks better. I just feel like we need to modify this a little bit. I feel like that text is a little too big. And again, we are using 16px. When I click on this text, it is also 16px, but it just looks a little off. So let's look at maybe changing the font size just a tiny bit for this button itself. So to do that, we are actually going to click on this button itself. I'm just going to make sure that I click on it, and we're going to click on this little triangle, and it's going to take us right to where the button is, which is right here. Okay, so now with that said, we're going to have a look at what is the actual items or what is the actual variables for this. So I'm going to click on the font itself. Let's see. Okay, so it has semi-bold and it's got 15px. Let's change this to 14px and see how that looks like. You're going to notice that it automatically changes everything for you, which is perfect. And you're going to see it's a little smaller. And I personally really like that. I like that look and feel. It's starting to look like a basic navigation. Okay, so one thing I want to add though, and so I'm going to go back to the homepage. And one thing I want to add is a little icon. So we are going to click on Shop Now, and we're going to click on Plugins and Iconify. I'm going to get that to open up. And I'm going to search for cart because I want to add a little cart. And so let's go for something like this. This looks different. I'm just going to insert it into our actual item itself. So let's take this and drag it in there. Okay, so now you're going to see that it dropped the icon, and it probably dropped it right there at the beginning, which is not what we want. We actually want to add it into the button itself. To do that, we're going to right click on the button, and we are actually going to detach the instance. And you're going to see that it changes it to a custom button. So I'm going to go back to the icon. And again, we need to change the frame to group. And we're going to take this and we're going to drag it in here. Now, the last thing, we just need to change it to, let's say light. Nope, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to click that again. And let's look for white. Perfect. All right, let's have a look at preview. Okay, it's close. It's not there. I just want to go ahead and change the actual size. And to change that, we got to constrain the property, select the actual group. We're going to change this to 14. And we want to select button, and we want to make sure that the actual alignment is center. And when we look at the preview, perfect. It is getting closer. The last thing I want to do is just change the gap to maybe 10. Let's see how that looks like. Yeah, that looks good. That looks really good. So now we have a base navigation. The next step that we need to work on is actually start putting the slider together. And when I say slider, I'm essentially referring to the actual image in the background, the actual starting point of what people would see when they first go to this homepage.